Most astronomers believe the universe began in a Big Bang about 14 billion years ago. In a fraction of a second, the universe grew from smaller than a single atom to bigger than a galaxy. Time, space, and matter all began with the Big Bang. Of course, this could be all bollocks.
So you can bring the lights up. As I hope you are all very well aware, that's it, I can go. Thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to spend the next hour talking about artificial intelligence and how you can get it to work with FileMaker. But I thought before I introduce Johan Hedman, who's going to be speaking with me, and myself, it might be a good idea if I introduce artificial intelligence, because there's a lot of opinions out there. It's a bit of a hot topic at the moment. And I think whether you look back 14 billion years back to the Big Bang and consider what might be happening next at that scale, I think artificial intelligence is going to play a big part. Or maybe you want a shorter time scale. Maybe you just look back 10,000 years. Artificial intelligence, I think, is going to play a big part in what's going to happen next. In fact, if you look back maybe just a day or two to the FileMaker keynote, I think perhaps AI is going to play a big part in what happens next. So what is it about AI? What's so exciting about all of this? Well, it likes to phone you while you're doing a talk, and it starts to ring just over there somewhere. It's pretty cool. AI is pervasive. It's all over the place. But if we talk about human progress, rather than people turning their phones off, what you find is that people will say, well, the way us humans are progressing, and you can measure it in lots of different ways, but people like to say it's exponential, right? So our intelligence, we're getting exponentially faster, better, more intelligent, and all the rest of it. And you've probably seen that before. And as you're probably not surprised to see, if you do the same kind of thing with computers and say, well, how are computers going? Well, you get an exponential graph as well. But something interesting happens. These things are evolving quicker than we have been evolving through, typical biological evolution, which suggests that at some point in the future, there's every likelihood that computers will be more intelligent than people. Now, what I think is most interesting about all of this is that the experts are saying we're sitting about here somewhere, that we're not that far off, and that what comes next are these computers being smarter than us. And because of a little thing called recursive self-improvement, it may happen quicker than you might expect. So what is recursive self-improvement? Well, that's where you build an AI and you get people and you train the AI, but then it gets to a point where, guess what? The AI doesn't need you anymore. It improves on its own. And it does this much quicker than when people train it. Therefore, although we're not there yet, it might happen quicker than any of us expect. What's interesting is a few moments after that moment in time in the future where an AI is as intelligent as the most intelligent person on the planet, because just a few seconds later, the AI will be twice as intelligent as the most intelligent person on the planet, and then perhaps a few minutes later, the AI could be infinitely more intelligent than the most intelligent person on the planet. Now, we're not really here to talk a lot about this stuff, although I am over beers tonight if you want to join me. But if you want to get into some research on this and really make your own opinions, and maybe you're a masochist and you're really excited about it like I am, or maybe you're a bit fearful of it, whatever your emotional response is to that, I recommend you go to the URL that you'll find on the slide, and it's right at the bottom of the screen there. There's a great article on the artificial intelligence revolution. But if we step back and look at things more practically, even companies like Price Waterhouse are happy to throw their hat into the ring and say that within about 10 years' time, artificial intelligence will contribute more to the global economy than all of India and China combined. So even if we look short-term future, AI seems to be pretty big. But I would warn you against listening to too many people talk about AI, because it's an extremely disruptive technology. And some very smart people in history have got it really wrong. So when you talk about the disruptive technology of writing, even Socrates thought it was a bad idea to write things down. It would be terrible because you're going to create forgetfulness in the learners' souls. So I think when experts are talking about what they think is going to happen with artificial intelligence, take it with a grain of salt. Or do what I do and make your own opinions. So I've been working with AI for well over a decade, and I keep going to Google Trends. You can do this yourself. It's really easy to do. Go to Google Trends and have a look at the interest in AI. And I compare it to iOS. So iOS, obviously, a product just coming from one company, and up until the end of 2016, there were more people interested in finding out more information about iOS than this broad topic of AI. So I didn't like to talk about it too much, and also people thought I was smoking funny stuff if I said what I thought AI could do 5 years ago. But in 2017, things changed. Anecdotally, I found customers coming to me asking me more about artificial intelligence, so I started tracking the trend again. And as I was going through 2017, I saw that people are now becoming more interested in AI. And if we look now, halfway through 2018, people around the world are probably almost 10 times more interested in AI than they are in iOS. But I think the best quote that really resonates with me is this one from Douglas Adams. I think, as he says, technology that exists when we're born, yeah, that's fine, that's normal. If it's developed before we're 35, it's very exciting. If it comes after 35, we're a little bit cautious about it. When we talk about artificial intelligence, I really think it's important to break it into two pieces. It's a little bit like asking someone to talk about science. You can talk about pure science or theoretical science, and that has a whole bunch of interesting stuff going on. Or you could talk about applied science and how it really impacts everyday life. AI is the same. You can have wonderful philosophical debates about it, but that's really pure AI or theoretical AI. You're probably pleased to hear that what we're going to talk about today is mostly applied AI. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about pure AI. I will mention something just briefly so you can win a few beers when you're arguing with people at the pub, so I'll give you a little bit of ammunition. But we'll spend more of our time talking about a certain flavour of artificial intelligence, and it's what people often refer to as enterprise-based artificial intelligence. That's the stuff that Yo and I have been playing with. And really it's the low-hanging fruit of AI. It's chatbots. Something super exciting for FileMaker developers are conversational user interfaces. So anyone can go out and build a chatbot. They're really cheap and easy, and you can get into them straight away. But as a FileMaker developer, you can be listening to the conversation and have scripts changing the user interface as people are conversing with the AI. So just imagine the power of that. Like a picture tells 1,000 words. So instead of just giving them an answer, you change the user interface. Some of you may have come here hoping to hear about machine learning. I'll spend a little tiny bit of time talking about neural networks because people kind of expect that when you talk about AI, if they've been doing a bit of reading on it. Actually, I think we might just spend the whole time talking about multidimensional fractal derivatives because I knew Johan loved it when I was talking to him about it. So maybe we'll just do a whole session on that next year. I'll see if I can get that one through. At the very end, I'll just spend a couple of minutes talking about a roadmap, which is how do you go and take this and implement it in your own business. Now, to set your expectations, we're not going to spend much time talking about pure stuff or about derivatives or roadmaps. We will get hands-on. So Johan's going to show you how to build a chatbot and a conversational user interface. If we've got time at the end, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a real case study and then just discuss very briefly the roadmap and the other stuff. So finally, introducing the two of us. Why are two of us doing this presentation? Well, about a year ago, I built an AI system for a company, but I did it from start to finish, and it went really well and became very popular. So I ended up having to build 4 or 5 for that one company, and I'm now getting other companies coming in. So I went to someone like Johan, as I often do, who actually knows what he's doing, and I said, we need to build a platform so I don't have to keep doing this from start. So Johan has helped me build a platform that has FileMaker connected to Google's AI. So the platform's up and running. We've got people training on it already. And we are in the process of having that platform deployed to companies so that they can actually run these systems. What you're going to see today are little snippets of the platform that is part of a paid training package. So you won't be able to download everything and pull it all apart, but you will get little sneak peeks as Johan's doing his hands-on stuff as to how the thing actually works. So you'll find out a lot about it. So yeah, here's more the technical side of things. I'm more implementing things. He wanted to mention how he's an adrenaline junkie. And I also am an adrenaline junkie. He's getting his from caving, which he did, like I don't know how many meters down. He did some caving just before DevCon. My adrenaline's coming from 2 little rugrats, 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, that give me a lot of trouble. But here's a photo that Johan wanted to show you. I don't know about you, but I really think that's photoshopped. It feels very much like he's been photoshopping stuff. And here, his photoshopping skills are getting a bit stronger. He's putting in shadows, so And I was going to have 2 photos of my cute kids, which I thought would be really nice, but I thought you might all think I'm a tosser, so I put in a photo of me trying to show you myself being in the green room, they call it, at Manly in Sydney where I live. All right, so let's answer that question. What is artificial intelligence? So in terms of how you would define it, back in the 50s, Alan Turing came up with this test. It's a very simple one. He was passing pieces of paper under the door, but right now we could imagine that as being your phone, sending a text message. If I send a text message to Fred and a text message to Sue, and I'm having this conversation, and I can't tell the difference between the AI and the person, then Alan Turing would say the AI has passed the Turing test. At the same time, in the 50s, they had what is considered by many to be the seminal event for artificial intelligence. They brought people around the world to try and build some AI, and they said, well, what's the definition of what we're trying to do here? And I like this one better. They were saying like machines or computers that use language, form abstractions and concepts, improve themselves, and importantly, solve the kinds of problems that we typically reserve for humans. Well, that's artificial intelligence. Now, when you see the stuff that Johan builds, I think you'll probably agree, it probably passes this test, but I doubt that it passes the Turing test, because as we move forward in time, people are starting to understand what chatbots are like, and they realise the chatbot is actually an AI, it's not a person. So there's different definitions of artificial intelligence. The last thing I'm going to say about pure AI. Right now, all of the AI is considered to be very narrow. So you can write an AI to beat the world chess champion. Recently, they built an AI to beat the world Go champion. Now, the difference there is the AI that beat the chess champion calculated every possible move and came up with the best move. In Go, there are far too many moves to calculate all of them, so they had to write an AI that was intuitive almost, and they didn't expect, I don't think even the programmers expect the AI to beat the world Go champion, but it happened. So it's pretty cool, and it's very powerful. It's extremely narrow, though. It's only really being applied to one thing. When AI can be applied to broad things and keep beating humans, not at just one particular task, but at everything we do, they're going to call that probably something like artificial general intelligence. We don't have it yet, but it'll be broad and still very strong. What comes after that is artificial superintelligence that is not only smarter than us, but it's aware that it's smarter than us. And again, this is the stuff that really excites me and scares the pants out of most other people, and that's a bit to do with my masochism. So that's it for the pure AI. Let's talk about enterprise AI. For this one, I'm going to play a 1-minute video. I apologise for those of you that have been to my sessions before, you've seen this, but there's a joke in there that people don't often get first time, so try and work out the joke. If you are seeing it for the first time, this is a 1-minute video of what the FileMaker Go application looks like that we're going to be talking about in the demo.
Are you waking up in the middle of the night trying to understand where your business is going? Well, now you can have a list of everything that's important in the palm of your hand with just one business app. You can easily see profits. Just tap to go into details, where you can see, for example, your opportunities and your biggest threats. And Siri is also there to help you.
What are the biggest threats to my business? Set up an appointment with Fred for 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Now you can go back to sleep without any concerns. At least until tomorrow.
I like seeing a bit of cross-collaboration over here, people discussing what they thought the joke might have been, which is great. So this is the thing, I've been running with this for many years now. What I built last year didn't look like that, but what Johan's going to show is the mechanics behind it. And what was interesting with the project last year that I worked on, I had to import data from 14,000 Excel spreadsheets. So I wrote a FileMaker program to do it. So the FileMaker program sucked in data from 14,000 spreadsheets and put it in a data warehouse sitting in FileMaker. And when we tried to replicate that and create a platform out of it, Johan and I were trying to come up with a name for it. We're thinking something like artificial intelligence platform, but I'm thinking we might go with something like workplace innovation platform. I think that probably fits a bit nicer with what we're trying to do. At the core of all of it is really a chatbot. What is a chatbot? As you can see there, a person says something into a microphone or maybe types it on a keyboard, and the first bit of AI kicks in. The first bit of AI translates or transforms the voice into text. Then a second piece of AI kicks in. Now that you've got written text, the second AI has to try and work out what that text is saying. What is the intent? What are the verbs, what are the nouns, what are the adjectives, what are you trying to say? And then that AI goes through that intent out to an external API, which might have another AI running machine learning kind of thing. Or you can take that information from the intent and just pass it to a query like SQL or into FileMaker and just query your database the way you normally would, get an answer to the question that you've just interpreted, and then take that answer back to the user either through a speaker, so you actually just say the answer like when you're talking to Siri, or you might say the answer when you're talking to Siri and show something different on the screen, which is this conversational user interface. So basically what's happening, it's just taking the nouns out and creating some kind of JSON file. So effectively simplifying it right down, that's how a chatbot works. The data that you've got sitting in FileMaker, you'll need to grab the data that's sitting in all your different tables and relationships and bring it all into one big flat file, which is often referred to as a cube or a data warehouse. And it's not rocket science, it's just something like this, where it's going to be all values, no calculations, because you want it to run really fast when it gets hit by the query language or by the AI. So all indexed, really neat, and the different columns are just like fields in your FileMaker file, and they refer to these in a cube as dimensions, pretty much one and the same. Unique text within a dimension or within a field for you, unique text is considered the entity or the noun in many cases, right? So you can kind of picture that when you take a sentence and say you've said, I want to see what my sales were for customer one last week, if you can extract the information out of that, then you just run a query which is going to customer one, the date is for the start and finish of last week, and it comes back with the profit or something like that. So that's pretty much, in simple terms, how the chatbot works. The conversational UI is just that as you're having this conversation, it shows you a screen that's most appropriate. Could be a list, maybe you've asked about Fred, so it takes you straight to Fred. And here's the kicker. The one I did last year were for engineers in a factory, and when they said, what's the performance of my machine going to be next week, instead of just telling them, this is probably going to be the performance of your machine next week, we would show them a graph like this so they can see why the AI came up with that prediction of performance. As far as machine learning goes, hands up if anyone's heard of neural networks. Hands up if anyone wants to understand how they work. Okay, a few more than I expected. This is where it's going to be hard for you guys to keep up because I'm going to go quickly through this, right? Because no one really wants me to spend too much time on it. So, neural networks. You've got very specific inputs, very specific outputs, and then these hidden layers. There's not normally just one hidden layer like this, there's normally multiple hidden layers. Think of hidden layers as algorithms, right? Just lots of algorithms. You have specific inputs coming in. I'm not supposed to stand too close to that speaker, but I get excited, sorry. I'll stand on this side. You've got inputs coming in, all these algorithms, and then outputs over there, very specific ones. As the algorithms are processing the inputs, they're trying to work out which output it is. So if you're looking at, say, character recognition, you write an A, it goes through the algorithms and it tries to pick out of the 26 possibilities the letter A. It gets some scores about whether it's getting it right or wrong, and the same process is used when it's converting voice to text, when it's winning games of chess. It's just inputs going to outputs through all these hidden layers. Now, the question is, why doesn't it have to do all the possible calculations? The reason, if you remember back to your school mathematics, are derivatives. So when these algorithms are trying to process the answer, it actually looks at derivatives. So the first derivative, if you remember, gives you the slope of the line. If you have a zero slope, then the second derivative tells you whether it's a maximum or a minimum. So what's happening is, as the neural networks are processing all this information, they're working out, are the algorithms giving me a better score or a worse score? Now, if you're looking for a better score in chess, it doesn't bother going down the slope, because that's a worse score. What it does is go up the slope. So any permutations that take it down the slope are never calculated, which means in these 8 situations here, you're not finding the absolute maximum of this 3-dimensional curve, and in AI, you could be talking about 30 dimensions instead of 3 dimensions. You're not finding the maximum, you're finding the local maximum, which is why they say with AI, you never know if AI has got the right answer or not, like when it's playing a game of Go, because it hasn't calculated every possibility. What they were hoping for is that the local maximum in the game of Go would be higher than a human, and it was. So that was it. That's it for how neural networks work and machine learning. The few people that put their hands up are kind of nodding, so I think I'm going to just move straight on. If you want to ask me questions about anything, after this is finished, ask me about these guys. So I do machine learning, but I write my own algorithms, and mine are multidimensional fractal derivatives. But that's not rocket science, right? It's not as silly or ridiculous as it sounds. The multidimensional stuff makes sense. We talked about that. That's just that table in FileMaker, different colors, different dimensions. So not a big deal. If you've done, anyone done get pivot data calculations in Excel? Wow, that few. That's right, we're in an Apple thing. But there are some calculations you do with pivot tables in Excel where you need to think multidimensionally. So if you've done that, you've already done the multidimensional stuff. Over on the right are derivatives. Now you know them because you remember them back from school. So those two bits make sense. The bit in the middle is the fractal. A fractal is just an algorithm that allows you to zoom in as much as you like or zoom out as much as you like. And that's basically it. So my algorithms are doing this. This I can talk about at length. Love doing it, but not allowed to do it. So I think I'm going to agree with this guy. If you can't explain it simply, then you don't really understand it well enough. I totally agree with that. So when I'm talking to my clients, unlike a room full of FileMaker developers, I would be saying to them, here's a piece of paper, cut it into 3 pieces, grab a pen, actually, we've got someone here who might be able to make the UI a little bit better for these, but I don't get too tricky with how this stuff looks. I just give them a pen and paper and say, look, just jot down what it is you want to see when you start the day. What's your phone going to have on it? Marketing director or sales director? And what are the questions you want to ask? And as you ask those questions, what do you want to see? Do you want to see a chart? Well, then draw a chart. Do you want to see a list? Then draw a list. So it takes all of the mystery out for the customer. They can actually have a great conversation with you about what they're trying to achieve. And as he said, although this sounds really easy, any of you that have tried to do this kind of thing, it actually can be a lot harder than it seems when you actually start doing this with your clients, but it's worth it because in the end, you can move mountains. Right, you're probably wanting me to get off stage and get Johan on stage so I can show you some hands-on stuff. So we're now going to dive a bit deeper into chatbots, conversational user interfaces. He's not going to create machine learning algorithms, but he is going to use the ones from Google. So over to you, Johan.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so from here on, it's going to be a lot more technical than the theoretical part that he has said. So this is the part where the FileMaker gurus, all of you here are going to like, so hopefully. So for any kind of techniques here, when we talk about artificial intelligence, it's always going to be 3 different areas where you need to address. First, the artificial intelligence itself, and there's quite a few of those to choose from. And then it comes to a way of authenticating yourself towards your AI or your FileMaker. And in this case, what we've used is a webhook, but it could be many other things. But in this example, we're going to show you a webhook and how that works. And then lastly, of course, it's going to be FileMaker sits there with your data. That's going to be important for the user interface where you actually talk to your data. So we're going to walk through all these different techniques here. So first, when it comes to artificial intelligence, there are coming new ones up pretty much every day. But if you walk to the big companies like Amazon, for example, they have tons to choose from. We had a session here earlier with Jesse Barnum, where you can do microservices, and some of those are AI as well. But there are plenty to choose from. Then if you go to Microsoft, they have Microsoft Azure. They have a lot of different things you can choose from. So depending on the purpose, you can choose different AIs. Then of course, Google have a few ones as well. For example, the Google Prediction. But the one we choose for this purpose, we choose the one called Dialogflow. The reason for us showing Dialogflow is it's very easy to set up, and also it is just one click away of starting to set up a Smalltalk. Now Smalltalk is nice for a way to communicating with your AI, because it's going to make your solution looks gooder and works better. But when it comes for any kind of artificial intelligence, it comes to, you're going to have to start doing some kind of machine learning. So when you start your first AI, it all comes down to your having your first book with white pages. You're going to have to start writing your first page with the information that this AI is going to learn. So the more you learn it, hopefully what you're going to have a whole library full of books where you can ask for any kind of question, and that will give you a response back that's going to be useful for you. So that brings us to a number of small videos that we created that might be a little bit tricky for you all the way back to have a look at, but everything here is going to be recorded. So if you can't see it, remember when you come back home, you can still look at the video when FileMaker released those. So first what you're going to do is you're going to walk up to dialogflow.com, and as you can see here, you can sign up for an agent yourself for free. And most of the AIs that you find out these days, they're all for free. So we just click on this button, and once we get in there, we're going to create our first agent. And what we're going to call this agent, we're going to call it DevCon 2018, strange name. And then what you can do is that you can allow it to use a language. If you want to have something else in English, you can put it into a time zone, and you can even attach it to a Google project if you're using a Gmail address as the account for setting this one up. So if you're in case of setting different projects up for Google, this is a good way to hook it to that one. Then it always comes down to start the training phrase. And the training phrase is going to be really easy at start. So for this first video here, we're going to give it a start training phrase. So we're just going to go in here and add our first training phrase. We're going to give it a couple of words, and then we're going to give them a few words to save up. And then you can see they put already here, find out the system name for AI. We didn't have to enter that, it got there for itself. So it's already kind of smart in a way. So we just enter welcome and hello AI, and then once we save the stuff here, up on the right side here, we have a small chatbot where we can try everything out that we've actually learned the AI. And if you look down to the right there, you can down see that we got the response back out of our question. But what's more important here is we want a way to integrate our solutions with AI. And for that, they already have some tools for that. And it's really easy for us to integrate that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a web chatbot that we can reuse inside of FileMaker. So we click on this web demo, and it brings up a new window for us. Once we enable it, you can see we got the URL here. Our URL we can reuse in what? Like a web viewer, for example. So once we have that up and running, and you enter that URL, you see you got the web chatbot up and running. That's how easy it is to start up your first chatbot. So now once we have that one up and running, you can say it's working. We now can start asking it questions. So we started the first question here, and then we do another one. And as you can see, it gives us a kind of polite answer back because it didn't know the answer. But the more you teach it, and the more you add it on, if you, for example, add on the small talk, you will get an answer. So once we now have a chatbot up and running, the next thing is that we want to apply it to our solution. So as Luke said before, we built up a training series, which you, of course, all can use if you want. So it's a paid training series where you learn how to use FileMaker and set everything up. So if you go in here, I'll show you how we set it up and how my account is working for that moment. So we had our chatbot in the web browser, and if you ask different questions, you will get different answers. But what we also have done is we have created a web direct solution. So we have there created a way to create new users. If I enter my email address, I will receive an email with my credentials to get in contact with this solution of ours. So I send this one off, and back I get an email with a quite complicated password, which I'm not going to copy here. I'm not going to write down, so I'm going to copy that one instead. And I'm going to walk straight into the solution that we built. So once I've copied and I click on the login button, it's going to take us into the solution. And you look on your left side here, you see a web viewer. So with that chatbot already started, we just need to enter the name of the chatbot. And as you can see, we now have it up and running. So now we try it and see if we can get a response. So as you can see, now we have AI inside of our FileMaker solution. But what we wanted here was a way to talk to the data that sits inside of your FileMaker solution. So for that, we needed to authenticate ourselves with a webhook. And for that, we have created a PHP file that we can use to connect. So to be able to do that, we need to create a fulfillment. So in the fulfillment, if you enable that one, you get a way of adding a URL for that PHP file. So if we have copied that file and we paste it into the webhook and use the same credentials that we had to log into that web direct solution, So the URL and then my email address again, and then copying that same password that come along with that email. It gives us credentials to reach the data that sits inside of FileMaker. And for everything that you do here, you're gonna want to make sure that you save everything, otherwise nothing's gonna work. So it's not like FileMaker where you can just walk out and it's still saved. But this webhook here, it's a very simple PHP file where we are saying you want to authenticate yourself towards this database with the username and password that you just saw, and then you connect yourself to the database and saying these are the parameters that I want to ask the database for, and they respond back. In this case for Dialogflow, they want it in JSON. And since 16, we can do anything with JSON, so we can easily handle that things. So once we have this webhook up and running, we can then authenticate ourselves and reach the data and handle it from that part. So with that, I'm going to need Luke to come up on the stage again and explain a little bit more about intents, entities, dimensions, and elements before we head on forward.
So it's okay, I won't be spending the rest of the time. He's going to do more demo stuff. But he asked me to run through intents. And that kind of relates back to that picture you saw before, where you've got one table in FileMaker, and you've got all these different dimensions. When it comes to intent, this is really the core of the chatbot. So you can actually go and build a chatbot yourself using FileMaker, 100% FileMaker. If you're going to do that, the piece that you need to really understand and work on is the intent. And the way this works is that you can see at the very top, it talks about context. Now, if you were to say, what were my sales, what were my total sales? It says 27,000, and you say, what were they last week? But you don't mention sales again. It knows you're talking about sales. The way it knows that is that when you have a question or a response, it saves the context of what was just spoken about. And if you don't give it any other measures, then it assumes you're talking about the same context. So that's the first thing you need to do. The second thing there is events. We're not talking about that today. That's, you can trigger stuff off without actually talking to it, so maybe a time of day or something like that could trigger it off. The training phase is the more important one, and Johan's already gone through that. If you say something and it matches the training phrase. Now, when I say that, I mean the class of question. It doesn't have to be all the same words. It just has to be close enough to match that Dialogflow says, well, the action that I need to perform now, because I've got to match to this intent, the action is the action that's written up there, action total measure. And when it performs that action, it takes parameters with it. And those parameters are, you might be able to guess this, the entities and the nouns that were in the sentence. So then it goes and passes itself across to that beautiful table I showed before, the different colors, and it says, well, out of this sentence, I understood that you're looking for customer one, I know you're looking for sales, and I know which time period we're looking for. So that's basically the overview of the intent. Is that cool? Now I've just got one more thing I'll mention, and he talked about the training. It is paid training, but there's also a full 1-hour webinar. If you go to the link that's on the screen there, you get it's like a preview of what's going on in the training. So if you really want to get into more details but not pay for the training, then you can go and look at the webinar there.
Good, thanks. So now that you know what parts we need of the Dialogflow to work with, I'm going to show you how we set the first question up to actually get the AI to work with FileMaker. So we're going to create an intent, but for any kind of intents, we need entities. And entities are kind of the words that we search for in FileMaker. So we're going to give the entity name of measure, and what we're going to use then after that are the entities that we need to do any kind of queries towards FileMaker. So the first word I'm going to enter here is revenue. And revenue can also have different other synonyms. So we're going to also add sales. So with these two names would probably be a field in your database or something that you can relate to. And once we have that up and running, we can go back into intents and we can create queries towards the database. So we're going to give this one intent total measure because we just entered the measure as entity. And we're then going to give it a training phrase. Like I said, we need to write the pages in your book. So we need to start its learning phrase. So we're going to give it a learning phrase. So we're going to ask it, what were my total sales? And we're going to save it up. But most importantly here, if we scroll down all the way to the down here, you can say there is a part for fulfillment. And you can see here that these are the different entities that we used as well. So we used measure, and you can also say that we have used sales because it's been highlighted. So if we go down to the fulfillment here, you can see if we enable that one, we now can use the webhook that we set up before. So this is the part where we actually connect FileMaker and the first query. So for any kind of system, you need data. And what we have in FileMaker is really structured data. We have our fields of different types of dates, numerics, of text. And that's just what they will be asking for. They need structured data. So in this solution here, what we have given is 1,000 records of data that you saw before that Luke explained with the different columns of the cube, where we store data so it's really easy for the AI to search for anything. So if we go back up here again into our WebDirect solution and we look at the data, we can say that it's just plain data, as it probably looks at all of your solutions as well. We have brands, we have customers, we have dates, we have numbers. So with all this information, as you all have, you can connect it up to any kind of source. But what's important here, and what's the thing that we want to have a look at, is that we want to integrate that data to your AI. So if we go back up here again, and we start asking these questions that we just were teaching the AI, and we're going to say that we get a response here. You see the 27,000 there? If we ask the chatbot, same question, the 27,000 comes straight out of our FileMaker database as a total. There's nothing sitting in between here. It just summarized out of that question the 27,000. How long did it take me to set this up? Less than 20 minutes? So the summary here is our actual data that sits inside of FileMaker. So if we go into our WebDirect solution right now and we did that same question, what we then have done is that we know the query, we know the answer. You can then also not only give them the 27,000, we can also give them shorts. It could be any other things that we want, because now we are in FileMaker, and all of you are gurus of taking care of that. So once you are in FileMaker, you can handle the answer in any way that you want. So the 27,000 here is just one question. Think of all the other options you have of showing your customers your data. So if we go back up here again, and we go into entities, and we add another field. So we add a profit here, meaning we now have a new way of searching for data in your system. So we make sure we save that up, and we go back into the entities, and as you can see, we have the measures, and then we know if we now ask a new question to the AI, you'll say if we then ask for the new word of profit, total profit, it runs off using the webhook, and it's giving us another answer. It's giving us 10,000. So now it's looking at another field and it's summarizing it for us, just giving us a new answer. So if you go back up to WebDirect solution and you have a look at those questions, and we run them over again, you're going to see the chart we see right now is of profit, because we asked that question. But if we ask another question, we can then change the view to show, for example, the revenue that we saw before. So it's totally up to you how you want to show your users the data. So that's how easy you can handle it. In FileMaker 16, we got the JSON function, and JSON is pretty much all we need to communicate with any kind of AIs or APIs these days. JSON functions are really good, and if you haven't started learning about them, I really recommend you to start to have a look at those. That's what Dialogflow uses. It uses JSON to get the data back and forward. So if we again ask one of those questions we had before, and we look at what kind of data is sent back and forward in between the artificial intelligence and FileMaker, you can see that we got a response back. You can see the measures that we have. And if we go into diagnostics, we can see this is the question where we had, and this is the action that we used, and these are the different entities, intents, and then you can see that we used the word sales, and then if we go back to the response we got from FileMaker, it could actually tell you in speech, or it could just display the text for you. It's totally up to you. You can also ask the question as a speech. And once you get back up again, you can see the whole JSON that comes along includes the intent's name, the answer. It gave us the name that we used, the webhook, the answer of 27,000, and also, of course, that it was a success of getting the data back and forward. So once we have that data, we can then, of course, take that data and do funny stuff in FileMaker. So I made this really small, simple solution to kind of explain what you can do with this JSON. So up on the left side here, we have a data field where we just pasted that JSON. And then on the upper right side, you can say, I used a function called JSON list keys, and I took that data field. Out of that JSON, I then get those six fields, the ID, the lang, result, session ID, status, and timestamp. If I then create a picker field with a value list out of those fields, and I choose the one called result, and I used another JSON function called JSON list values out of that data field and picker field, I then get the subpart of that JSON, meaning I can narrow my way down and just picking the part that I want. So if I then start digging down through the JSON that I have, I can pick out stuff and put them into fields. So I can then handle the queries that comes in. I can do any kind of action that I want in my database, and I can store it. So I can see what actions, what intents we have. I can set up how I want the answers to look like. I can, out of that one, pick out the entities, the revenue and price. I can even pick out timescales and create date range out of that. I can pick up dimensions and the display text that I want. What we have done right now is that we have used the execute SQL queries to look through those 10,000 records to get the information. And out of that, we are creating the y-axis and x-axis, as you see on your right side here. So that's the months, and it's the result for each one of those months. So that's the result of the summary of those. So if you then go into the short, and you want to see something, you can just render that data out of that query. And for any kind of shortening, you can put it up in lines like we're using here, or you can use it in another way to make it look good. But what we did in this case, where we were using the current record with the limited data that you saw in those y-axis and x-axis fields to set the data up. But you could also use searches or use related fields, so meaning you can use current found set or you could use related data. So once we now have that up and running, we can then do different queries. So in your FileMaker file, you can set up queries depending on the questions that you do, or the action. So here we have a record that was using the intent total measure that we just set up, with the measure of profit, and the timescale we were using in this case was last month. So you can have different queries for different purposes, for days, weeks, months, or years. That's totally up to you. And you can have them in different records if you want. So depending on the query, you can do different things. So if we then use these shorts to pull out the data that we want, as I said, we have taken out of the JSON the action total measure. We then pull out what the timescale was, so we can then out of the timescale choose a date range or just the word of month. Then we can pick out the measures of the price, so we know what field we want to go to and do a search on. And the combination of those are going to give us the summaries of all those fields that we asked for. So there's been a lot of different sessions here, and still a few coming up about the FileMaker Data API. So you can even ask questions directly to that, getting the answers that you want. But I'm not going to walk that path now because it's going to take you more than the time that we have to wrap that one up. But if you want to learn more about the Data API, there's other sessions for that. So coming to all of that, what I'm now showing you is a proof of how easy it is to make FileMaker communicate with an AI, and also giving it a way of giving you more information about the response coming back from the AI in your solution. And with that, I'm going to bring Luke back up here to wrap up.
So we've gone through a bit of an introduction to talk about AI, and Johan has shown you some hands-on stuff. What I'd like to do next is really give you an idea of what customers think about this stuff. So when I gave a talk in Australia after doing the project for chartered accountants, I actually took the customer with me, and I said the better person to explain it is really the customer. Now, he didn't want to make the trip to the US, but I do have a very short video of him talking about it. This just goes for a few minutes, and this is, I think, really interesting. I wasn't sure whether I should play it or not, but Johan encouraged me that FileMaker guys are going to be okay with doing a little bit of customer talk here. So this is just the customer talking about the AI. Now, they called it IBEN. They wanted to give it a name. So if you hear him referring to IBEN, that's the AI that he's talking about.
So let me introduce you to IBEN. So IBEN is your own personal Siri for the business. So if you want to know anything about your department, just ask a question. So that's kind of how we introduced it to the team leaders. And if I was to kind of summarize that, right, it's pretty much people deserve just to work in great places, who not only talk about people development, but also walk it. Technology just happens to be the enabler. And that's what how we positioned it. So as an outcome, what you kind of see now, so Jeff Wall, which Luke mentioned, so a supply chain director who's here with us today, walked into our daily operations meeting a little bit early, about 2 months ago. And he saw this and he took this photo. And what you see here is, so the 3 frontline team leaders, they're kind of huddled around their iPhone, but you see that they're curious, they're talking to each other, they're showing each other different things. And in this actual example, so Tony, the one standing up, is our coding team leader. He was actually talking to the other guys saying, check this out. I didn't actually realize that this one flavor on this one coding pan takes an extra hour to code versus these other ones. And John, who's our reliability team leader, is going, I didn't know that either. So as an outcome of just that conversation versus the image that you saw before is they're slowing down, they're talking about facts, not stories, they're sharing insights with each other. And then all of a sudden you have this group of people all just working on the same problem, not on separate problems. And to me, that's actually really exciting because as you look at their faces and their gestures, they're showing that curiosity and they're showing that excitement. And for me, I kind of think, geez, what's possible, right? So now we're up to the stage where every frontline leader in our factory has this tool, has this capability to ask any interesting question and get an interesting answer back. And what this does is it provides full visibility and transparency to anybody in the organisation. But what it encourages is teamwork. And to me, actually kind of, again, thinking of that is you can interact through voice. So I'll ask a question. If it's loud because we're in manufacturing, I can text the question. Or as what Luke showed, I can just have a look at the graphs and that can kind of steer me in the right direction. So as an outcome, so as a result, within 10 months, the factory has been able to move the dial on efficiency by 13%. So they're numbers that we have never been able to achieve, let alone in 10 months, right? And really what excites me about being able to share this story with you is that now that we're up to kind of release 3, which is what Luke mentioned, the AI is only going to get smarter. So it's fairly basic at the moment because we've only just created it, but it's going to get smarter. And as it gets smarter, who knows what the possibilities will be and where we'll be in 10 months. Because people will be asking questions we've never asked or thought to ask. People will be solving problems that we've never thought to solve. And that's what kind of gives me goosebumps here just kind of talking to you about it. It's from a future of manufacturing, that to me is quite exciting.
So that was a 1-hour seminar that we did together, and I just took out 3 minutes of what he was saying, but it's because I thought of the stuff that he mentioned was just pure gold. One of the first things I like is that he said technology is just the enabler. So he wasn't distracted by all the kookiness of AI. He really wanted to get a result of improving the efficiency of the factory. And as we kind of looked back over it, as it was succeeding and the factory performance was getting better, we were talking about what is it that's working so well. And it was something really simple. It was that all the engineers were working on the same problem. And it was never a problem where someone went, oh, I never realized we had that problem. It was stuff that intuitively went, oh yeah, I knew that was going to be a problem, I just wasn't sure it was the worst problem. So the engineers know of like 200 different things they could be working on. And they'd often all have their own opinions and be off working on different problems. But when we ran this program, whether the AI is getting it right or not, who really cares? Like, as long as the 3 or 4 problems it picks are in like the top 10, those 3 problems were now getting fixed because they all had one single version of the truth. And the last thing he said was transparency to everyone. And that's kind of the main message I wanted you as FileMaker developers to get out of this. If you can now go off and build FileMaker solutions, and the only training you need to do is to say to someone, just ask the question that you've got, and it'll try and give you the answer. None of this like training sessions, how to type, how to find, how to search. Just ask the question, you'll get the answer. And for us, it was really powerful that everyone had transparency and one single version of the truth. So the final thing I'm going to do just before we wrap up, so we're into the last few minutes of the session, and it's just this 10-step roadmap. And I tried to think of, if you were going to go and have a go at doing this, what are the things that you wouldn't want to miss out on? And I think the first thing that seems to work for us is if you don't talk about the technology and what platform it runs on and all the rest of it, it's just like, what are your burning questions, Mr. or Mrs. Customer? So you start with the questions, remembering you have to realize they're dynamic questions. So you're actually looking for classes of questions because it's not the literal question that you're going to answer, it's the class of question. But basically it's just a conversation with what are your most important questions. Then the next thing you've got to do, step 2, is AI doesn't know the difference between good and bad. So if I say, what was my profit? And it says, the profit was $10,000 last week, the AI doesn't know if 10,000 is good or bad. So you've got to kind of do some target setting with the AI, kind of tell it what's a good number, what's a bad number. Step 3 is really the complexity that comes out of telling the AI what a good number is. Because you don't know what the question is going to be, you have to create these multi-dimensional KPIs so that you can pick any cluster. So this customer buying this brand in this month, what's the target for that? And that can be a little bit tricky if you don't start thinking about these multi-dimensional key performance indicators. Now, on any one of these points, you can ask questions about it. I'm just going to go through each one kind of briefly, and then we'll leave the rest for Q&A. Step 4 is the picture you saw before, which was just the template, which we call storyboarding, where they draw on a piece of paper what they want to see, and that's when you start talking about conversational user interface, and what you might find easy is very difficult for most clients. So you might have to kind of whiteboard a few examples. I often show them the video so that they know what the app could do, and then that kind of helps drive what they write on their pieces of paper. After you collect all the pieces of paper from the meeting, you go in and you open up FileMaker and you build what I call a proof of concept. So it's kind of a shell, like it's not connected to all the cool data yet. Basically, you just want to replicate the pieces of paper in FileMaker so you can hand them back a lovely iPhone, and they love it because the stuff they drew on pieces of paper is now showing up on screens within their FileMaker Go app. Now they're going to think you're finished. And you're going to realize, well, this is actually just a shell. It's not connected to anything yet. So step 6 is the prototype, which is where I call them placeholders when they're just sitting there on the screen, but you start connecting them to the data. In a prototype, I stick with one single snapshot of data. I've found if you move the data around, you go around in circles, so I stick with one snapshot of data and see if I can get that one single snapshot of data to answer the questions that they're giving me. Now that's quite easy because you know exactly what the data is when you're processing that, and you don't move on to step 7 until you get the sign-off from the client that for that snapshot of data, it's doing a good job of answering our questions. Then you're ready for step 7, which is the pilot, where now it's not one single snapshot of data. Now you're actually dealing with data that's being updated regularly. Typically these things would be updated once a day because you've got this data warehouse there. It's not normally live data. If a customer says, it's not fast enough, I want real-time data, I say, well, then you've already missed it. If it's real-time, don't you really want predictions of data? So what you really want is to predict what's going to happen next week. So in terms of the pilot, it's really the hard work's going into what's called ETL, extract, transform, load. So integrating the data from the system and showing it up in the AI. Then you're ready for step 8, which is go live, which is kind of like setting up the AI in the system, and you do all the people, process, system stuff. So you've got the systems, you've got your backups and security and all that going on. You're getting people involved, and you've got your processes linking into the system. Step 9 is monitoring it. So this being AI, when it's young, it's going to be pretty silly and pretty stupid. So you have to monitor it closely when you first start using it. But then after a while, you'll find that you're getting a pretty, and when I say after a while, for us, it was literally 1 or 2 cycles. So if you're running a daily thing, within 2 or 3 days, it's giving good answers. If it's weeks, then it's 2 or 3 weeks, it's giving good answers. And then of course, it's about improving it. And improving it could be broadening the scope of the questions you can ask. So instead of just asking about the factory, maybe you can ask about sales or marketing or other things. Or improving it could be like plugging in more things. So that's basically the 10 steps. That brings us to the end of the session. We are going to have updates. So if they've got any questions, we can put some more links or more information on the slides for you, because we are going to do updates. And please do fill in the survey forms, the session evaluation forms. We've got just under 5 minutes. So I'll ask Johan to come back up on stage, because if it's too tricky, I'm just going to ditch it and give it straight to him. But I'm happy to take any questions. Come up to the mic, because they're going to record the questions as well. So thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it. Good work, buddy. Good. Okay, so I talked too fast because we don't have one question. Johan said that would happen. He said, if you talk too quick, they're not going to understand a word that you say.
So good answers depend on good data, and I'm wondering if there are AI-specific processes that are used to help in the evaluation and clarification of the data.
So that's a great question. So that was one of the first ones I got from the factory director when we talked about the project. He said, I don't want to start this. He said, because we don't have good enough data. The downtime data that we've got for the machines, it's not accurate. I don't trust the engineers are doing it properly, so we can't start the project. And I said, well, let's reverse it. Let's start the project. Let's actually use the crappy data that you've got, get the whole program running, all the dashboards, all the AI, and what I need you to do is turn up to the first meeting. And he understood where I was going with it straight away. He went, okay, go on then, build it. So I built it, like the proof of concept with a bit of data in it as well. Turn up to the first meeting, and this actually happened. Like, he's the director, he's sitting there, he goes, oh, why is the bottling line going so bad? And the engineer for the bottling line says, it's going great. The bottling line hasn't been running better, but it doesn't look, the data's not, I'll fix the data for you next week, boss. So then everyone changed their behaviour, and they've been trying forever to get people to fill in timesheets and do all this stuff. And if what we said was, you know what, don't tell them to do that, just get the director to turn up and say, why is this information wrong? Well, it's because I'm not filling it in. So we reversed it. So rather than waiting for the data to be perfect, we built the report. And that's the thing with FileMaker, right? We can do that. Like SAP consultants can't do that. Enterprise systems can't do that. They can't whip something up in a few weeks. So I was like, no, let me just whip it up. Let's just build this. Let's show it to them. And hey, director, look really surprised when it's terrible data. And he did that. And it was the quickest cleaning of data you've ever seen.
Yeah, I love hearing both you guys talk, so.
If it's tricky, it'll be him.
I'm curious how much of one solution's learning you are able to not start from scratch for another solution.
Actually, yeah, do you want to have a
So
crack at that first?
the agent is always going to have to start from scratch. But there are ways of picking up stuff from other resources. So if you go to any of the big ones, they already have a lot of things. So if, for example, you want to do facial recognition, Google already have a lot of faces. So if you want a recognition of food or anything like that, they already know how a corn looks like, even though it's burned. So you can pick out of those things because they already have it up and running. So it's just about choosing the right AI. So you don't have to start everything from scratch.
Like if your customer was like sailing yachts, you could have it set up straight away so that they would say, what's the weather going to be like tomorrow? Well, you get that straight away because there's plugins for all that kind of stuff. But if you're saying, like, what's the efficiency on my machine going to be? No AI will tell you that because it needs someone like us to go and connect the AI to your proprietary information.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking like if one customer makes and sells shoes,
Yep.
and another one makes and sells socks.
Yep.
Isn't there a lot of that you can learn?
Super transferable. So in fact, the algorithms that I write, we sometimes use them to track policies inside an insurance company. Then we use it to track sales. Then we use the exact same algorithms to track performance on a machine. In fact, I used it in a pharmaceutical company to look at the attitude of the employees towards the leadership team. When the algorithm's really only doing something super simple. It's saying, what do I expect to happen? What actually happened? So that covers all manner of industries and all manner of work, and it's just a silly AI forever looking at what's the gap between what should be happening and what is actually happening, and then look at the historical gaps and predict the future ones. So where am I missing my targets in the future? And then telling managers and customers that, hey, you're going to have a gap in your sales in this territory before it happens, so they can still do something about it. That's gold.
Yeah.
So it can transfer to anything.
Buy Luke a beer and he will get you the fractal of all of those mathematical stuff. Yeah.
I have to get very drunk before I start talking about the fractals.
You spent very little time on theoretical AI, but I do have a question in that respect. If artificial intelligence continues to become more and more and more intelligent, at some point it's going to reach its limit just simply due to bandwidth or due to the speed of light or whatever the case may be, it would eventually reach a plateau.
How fast do you think this one is in real life?
I'm sorry?
How fast do you think this one in real life? What do you think this one can actually do if you really hooked it up? So this one is just doing a fractal of what it's supposed to really do. So what this really can do right now is much more than it's showing you. So if you then think of a computer with a lot of processors on, like anyone up in the cloud, and you have a lot of them, where you only have one here, think of all the things that you can do.
That's true.
Remember going back to when we had our first...
But the speed of interconnection is going to eventually put you to a stop.
But this is like any disruptive technology. Like let's start talking about nanotechnology. So already humans can manipulate molecules and atoms to create matter. So now imagine a super intelligent AI that can manipulate matter to create things to make computers run faster.
But it would have to reach that point first.
Yeah.
It's going to bootstrap it,
yeah.
like any good startup.
We're
getting a wind up for time, so you come and join us later to continue the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Hey,
Hi guys, great chat. Fundamental question, I suspect, because I haven't done this before. But so we spend all this time feeding in data. We've got our model, we've got all our parameters. We start getting incorrect results, and we feed that data back in. You spend a whole bunch of time getting to this point where you're really confident of your results. Then you want to go back and change a fundamental parameter or a few thresholds, something like that, way back at the beginning. Do you have to start this learning process all over again? Do you have to rebatch everything?
And that depends on how significant the change is. So it's at the moment AIs are very narrow. So they really need to be trained up on a specific task, and that's all they're really very good at. Later it might be different, but if you're telling it to learn about a particular topic and then you want to change the topic on it, then yeah, you need to kind of start from scratch.
Well, I wasn't thinking of chatbot terms. I'm thinking more in terms of
machine learning.
Yeah, machine learning.
Even those, with the neural nets, the thing about them, you have to be extremely specific about your inputs and outputs. Like you have to, they're goal driven. So tell them what the goal is that they're going for, and then yes, you can absolutely change the inputs. So it'll be good at adapting to different inputs. But if the goals change, well, that's all the algorithms are set up to produce that goal or to hit that goal. So if you change the goals, then it'll work against itself.
So we start training over again if there's
not from start, but...
Well, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I get
how
what you mean.
significant it is.
Thanks.
All right, thanks very much.